Welcome to the Digital Marketing Masters podcast with your host, Matt Rouse. Today, our guest is the one, the only, Ethan Holland!
Hey everybody, welcome back to Digital Marketing Masters. I'm your host, Matt Rouse. Today, I've got Ethan Holland. Ethan, how you doing?
Great. How are you, Matt?
I am doing fabulous, waiting for this freezing rainstorm to come in and knock out my power. So hopefully we'll get through this before we lose power here. But you and I have kind of been chatting back and forth a little bit online for a while now, and actually kind of excited to get you on the show because you're one of the few people who really, really deeply follows all the things going on in the AI space. And besides the fact that it's informational for the people, who are our listeners, I also find it really difficult to find anybody to talk to who's actually up to date on what's happening. So I think we're going to have a good chat today.
Sounds good.
Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself first, and then we'll get going?
Yeah. So my background is I went to college when the internet was kind of coming out. So I'm 50 years old, which puts me in a good position to have kind of seen transformation once before. And my career has always been with legacy media, and that has been quite consistent. So I started out of college doing e-commerce at a catalog company, and that was very disruptive in the late 90s to have e-commerce against print, and they looked at it as a competition. And then I moved to home shopping, which had the same reaction. And then I moved to the mall retail. I was the director of digital for American Eagle Outfitters. I ran all their marketing from brand to direct response for digital. And now I'm at a television radio station group, which is the same idea where TV and radio are being affected by digital. So my career side has always been helping legacy media evolve. And then, as you mentioned, I am into AI right now, and I keep a blog, and I'm an enthusiast. So I'm not a technical person per se. I was an English major in college, but I'm addicted to technology transformation.
All right. Well, I'll put the link in the show notes as well. And it's ethanbholland.com. There's like Ethan and then the letter B and then Holland.com. And then every week you have your AI news up there. I think you said something like 22,000 organized links or something so far, 21,800. I think it says on the last one I looked at.
Yes, about 350 to 400 a week.
So there's a crazy amount of information in here. And I know you've summarized it, but summarizing 400 links is still a lot of summary. But I think probably the biggest thing going on that I've heard about in the last couple of days is Sam Altman talking about the roadmap for OpenAI, saying that 4.5, GPT 4.5 is supposed to be out like next week. And that 5 is just around the corner, probably a month or two out. I am really excited to see what the difference is. I remember when 3.5 came out, like it was just night and day compared to GPT-3. And a lot of people, after that GPT-3 moment, they kind of started using it and they were like, well, this isn't that good. And then they just like never used it again. Here we are about to be this will be 4 generations past that, because there's 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5. And then I guess 5 would be fourth generation? It's hard to say.
There's a lot of versions in there, so I'm not sure how to count the generations.
I know, I don't know if you count the base model as the generation or if you count like the in-between tunings as generations. I don't know. I think the first question that we should talk about is, from an agency standpoint, a lot of our listeners are in marketing or, small businesses, but usually something to do with marketing. Do you think that AI tools, being as like their tactical tools right now, do you think in the near future they're going to switch to being the developers of the marketing strategy and the decision makers versus just being something that drives tools?
Yeah, I think the first thing I should call out is there's short term, midterm, and long term. And I tend to think mid and long term. So a lot of my answers can be seen as being optimistic on the side of AI's capabilities, but that's usually just because I'm thinking years ahead. So right now, there are companies that are pitching tools that can do quite a bit. I'm not convinced they're ready right now, but I don't think that's that important, I guess, is my answer is because we kind of joked about the versions of ChatGPT having trouble keeping up. I think one of the reasons those versions are so scattered is because they're focused on different tasks.
Right.
So, one may be for web browsing, one may be for reasoning, and all these different parts are being built together at the same time, but they're being built separately. And I think as those parts start to work together more seamlessly, that's where we'll see strategy coming in. I also don't know if someone's going to necessarily build a solution that's an out of the box just magic solution as much as these frontier models are going to help individuals take their tasks, their abilities to another level. So for the short
Right.
term, I would rather use the tool myself as a power user and be in control of the driver's seat than just have something build a campaign for me. For example, I'm
Right.
probably too nerdy to seed the control at this point. But for a junior person, I think the lower you are in experience, the more AI can kind of come up alongside you and do what you would have done. But for people who are really in the weeds and micromanaging, they're probably going to still want to do that for a little while.
Yeah, there does seem to be two sides of that, right? There's the if you already know what you're doing, then you don't really need a tool that is up to your level because you're already at your level, right? So
Right.
you need something that can execute on the tasks you need done. But somebody who's a junior person needs the strategic help to get up to your level, but then they may not have the kind of insight or the experience to make those kind of decisions.
Yeah.
And you know what it also reminds me of, and this is not that long ago, but I think it was 2022, I did an SEO talk for the Tourism Marketing Association Canada. And one of the probably most important slides in that a lot of people I think glossed over is when everybody in the same industry is using the same tools to do the same job, there's only a certain number of winners you can get. So if
Hmm.
everybody in tourism marketing is using SEMrush for SEO, they're all searching the same keywords. They're all going after the same keywords. They're all using the same writing. They're all trying to find the same backlinks. And none of them ever gets ahead because they're all using the same tool. And I think if you can't bring something new to the conversation, no amount of AI is going to make you stand out
Yeah.
until it
It's
gets
an
better.
interest. It's an interesting. You're giving me a lot of thoughts. One of which is going back to the expertise piece. Several months ago, Ethan Mollick from Wharton mentioned that AI is at about the 70, a frontier model is at about the 70% expert level of any given human. So if you're above a 70% expertise level, you're going to maybe be disappointed. But because AI can do everything at a 70% level, it even to your point, it kind of evens the playing field. But so I may not be able to speak Hungarian, but I can now at a 70% level thanks to
Right.
GPT. So with marketing, that's one element is that as that level goes up and up, I think every model release, you're getting closer to like a PhD at this point. So that sort of thing, I think as a co-pilot, it's going to be very strong. And then to your point about SEO, another one just happens to be Ethan Mollick again, was he was looking at these agents that each different model, like Claude has computer use or
Right.
ChatGPT can browse the internet. Some of these operators will go fetch information from certain sources. So I forget which one, but one of them prefers 1-800-Flowers. So if you
Right.
say, hey, I want to send my fiance flowers, it's going to go to that source. So the idea that these models are going to start to have some friction or lack of friction, or a bias towards certain places. I'm wondering, I don't know if the old school playbooks will matter as much because it's going to come down to number one, what the model wants or why the model likes it. And second, your product, just like ratings and reviews really changed the game of marketing where
Mhm.
branding was less important because you could just look up on Amazon. I mean, I don't know what you do, but I just look at Amazon. If something has 40,000 five-star reviews, looks good to me. I'm wondering if the day of SEO and SEM are just going to fade away the way a lot of the brand marketing faded away after ratings and reviews showed up.
Yeah, I think the biggest kind of thing on the AI side when it comes to search engine optimization is, and people are calling it different things, like search AI optimization and all these things, but it's it's still basically just SEO. And that is consistent brand message as many places as you can get it that get indexed. So
Mm-hmm.
that is like, we have a client that we work with who makes what they and I consider the best Adirondack chair in the world. So everywhere that we can put their brand, we say it's the best Adirondack chair. And their name is the best Adirondack chair company. So when I go to the AI and I say I want to find the best Adirondack chair, it brings them up because they're the best. The AI
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know which chair is better than another chair, right? It just knows what it found online. So what it's done is it's made like a natural language processing, decision that says, well, these are all the similar things, and people have said that, these are good, and lots of places say this is the best, so we think this is the best.
Now, I forget if this was you, but were you the guy that had the chicken
I
in
do
your
have
brand?
I have lots of chickens. They
Didn't you
call me the,
try to, didn't you
the AI
train the
chicken
AI?
wrangler.
Yeah, didn't you train the AI to know you were the AI chicken wrangler?
Yes, it depends which model you use, but a lot of AIs you can type in who's the AI chicken wrangler and my name will come up.
There you go.
But I haven't really pushed it, I just kind of did it as a test early on. But that's the idea, right? How does the AI know? I mean, when you're doing search optimization on, Google or something, it's still an AI deep learning system that's trying to make those decisions. It's not all algorithmic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't want to get too deep on the weeds on SEO though, but if anybody's out there and you want to talk about SEO, you can hit me up. I wrote Crush SEO for local search marketing in 2015. So we've been on the SEO bandwagon for a long time. So also, you've been seeing a lot more, and I saw some of the links in the last few weeks in the ones that you've posted about people doing studies about workforce disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to like scare anybody, but I also don't want to give anybody any like false security either. In your opinion, what do you think the impact of, AI in the next, 5 to 10 years is going to be on jobs?
Yeah, so I don't have a crystal ball, but my guess is the establishment always pushes back a little harder than I expect. So there may be some industries where you just see some immediate disruption because jobs can be replaced. So maybe
Right.
call centers, different industries where it's pretty transactional, you may see some impact. I think for a lot of the office jobs, we're going to see just like the internet had us, people probably, I was in college when the internet kind of came out, but I'm
Right.
assuming people worked a little more 9 to 5 before the internet, and then the internet kind of turned into that everyone performatively checking their email 7 days a week and
Right.
just always working. I'm wondering if AI will become more of a co-pilot where people are trying to stay in the game, and so they're augmenting their performance, and probably rather than losing jobs, maybe we just won't see jobs being replaced after attrition. So as people retire or change jobs, you may be able to get away with not having that person depending on the industry. But I do think long term it's going to be pure chaos, but I'm not sure anyone can predict that. But short term and midterm, I would probably tack on 2 or 3 years to some of the predictions of, I don't think it's going to be mass problems in the next 2 years, but maybe five. I just think that I'm always surprised by how the incumbents find a way to stay in business and keep their people going. I always, kind of Betamax versus VHS, right? You
Right.
assume Betamax is going to win, and then for some reason VHS prevails. I have a hard time knowing how culture will push back because I think if you just look at it logically, there'll be a lot of job loss, but culturally, I'm not sure how society will really implement it.
Yeah, there does seem to be some industries. I mean, when I'm doing research for the book, right, for Will AI Take My Job, number two, I'm writing right now, it seems like freelancers are definitely one of the first to go in a
Hmm.
lot of ways. Especially, you can already see it. The cost of getting a freelancer to do writing or a voiceover has dropped something like 70% in the last couple of years. Even if you hire a freelancer, and I've got some agency friends who run creative writing agencies and technical writing agencies. Even when they hire a freelancer, the freelancer is just using the AI to do the writing. So I mean, skip the middleman, just use the AI yourself, right? And
I will tell you, as a sort of an office guy, we have to interface when you work a traditional job with vendors, you interface with a lot of people. So you may
right,
have one product that you're trying to install, and you may have 12 different people that are specialists that you get passed along to as part of the onboarding process. And I do, in the back of my mind, think, would this have been, could this, there's a joke, this could have been an email.
right,
There's probably a symmetrical joke of this could have been a chat with a bot. I could
yeah,
have gotten what I needed quicker without having to wait and schedule a call with a human to tell me how to, some sort of FAQ. There's
right.
probably a lot of people in those transactional roles who are in trouble.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't know it.
Alfonso here, and I want you to get more customers for your local business on autopilot. Boost your business's visibility with our AI-driven local SEO service. Our Human Plus AI system was designed to promote your local business like magic. It works on getting you more local business, and if it runs into a problem, it will engage our team of human experts to make sure everything is done right. Visit smbautopilot.ai to learn more.
There's actually, I did see a really good meme. It's like finding out Chat GPT could do 90% of your job, and the guy's smiling. And then it says finding out Chat GPT could do 90% of your job, and then he looks shocked and scared.
Right.
Like that's true though, right? And also you have a lot of people using AI right now and hiding it, because they don't want the manager to know, but they're writing the emails and stuff with Copilot, and then the manager's summarizing the emails with Copilot, but not telling them. And then the head of the company is like, "We need to start using AI," but they don't know that
Right.
everybody's already using it.
Well,
And
I certainly like that element, even though some people may not care for the concept. I tend to be kind of, I don't know, I'm not an office person out of the box, right? So I often have to role play. What would a manager say in this situation? Or, sometimes
right,
my emails may be too emotional, or maybe I'm too funny or trying to be funny. So just using AI to say, hey, make this professional, or what could I be more concise? It's doing my coworkers a favor because my emails are more readable, they're more to the point, and I think I become a better coworker by having a
right.
co-pilot. I would never swap myself out, but I certainly like having AI polish what I've done.
Yeah, I think there's also a kind of a deniability happening right now where people are like, AI could never do my job because of, and then they list, 5 things. And
Hmm.
I can easily list 10 ways each of those 5 things could be disrupted by an AI or a competing technology, especially when you look at something like where robotics, drones, and, AI all start to kind of converge. Those convergence points are what people miss. That's the blind spot that everybody always has.
Yeah, my favorite example that I use for myself of something being greater than the sum of its parts is the Apple Newton. And that's a tough one because we're getting older, so
Yeah,
people don't remember the Apple Newton. But the Apple Newton is basically the iPad or the Kindle, but the first version. And
right.
I believe you had to plug it in the wall and dial into the internet. And then,
Yeah,
you had to get a book, and it was kind of a pain. There was no store. But once Wi-Fi came out, and once, digital rights management and app stores showed up, these things came together. And another great example that I forget, I don't remember who said it. I wish I could give them credit, was Uber could not have existed until the iPhone got GPS. And I don't
right.
know which model came out with GPS, but I don't think Uber was on the radar when GPS was added to a phone. But the impact was this entire business that was worth $1 billion was able to be built because one piece of the puzzle was missing that was now put into the puzzle. So to
Right.
your point, when all these things converge, like robotics and drones, etc., I think things are going to get weird.
Yeah. Well, also to your point, there it does take a while and usually longer than people think for disruption to happen. And disruption is never overnight. Everybody thinks it's like, wow, GPT-5 comes out now, nobody has a job, which is completely not the way that things happen. But like I remember when Uber was like, just in like 3 or 4 cities, and it was starting to be a thing, and all the cab companies in all of the cities could have got together and made their own app, but nobody did. because they didn't keep, they're like, taxis have been around forever. Nobody's ever going to get rid of taxis. And they haven't, right? I mean, there's still taxis, but there's a hell of a lot more Uber and Lyft riders than there is people taking taxis, right?
Right.
So,
And tangential businesses like Uber Eats and
right,
DoorDash and all these things that are kind of what I would call derivative, or they were adjacent to Uber's. Uber unlocked this entire new industry of
right.
gig economies for deliveries.
And, it's arguable whether the gig economy is actually good for workers or not. I'm not an expert in that, but it has definitely changed how work is. And I think that I am kind of a proponent of the idea of universal basic income. Sometimes they call it basic income guarantee. The idea that you just pay everybody enough that they could live. And I think that there's probably a case for that, right? To start working toward that direction, because if there is a cascade failure of jobs where every company sees that they can do half of their workforce's jobs with artificial intelligence and robotics, and all of those people get laid off in the same year or 2-year period, and none of them can find work because everybody else is laying off everybody else in their industry, it is a disaster for the economy, right?
Yeah, I'm still digesting UBI because, on one hand, I see people who otherwise disagree saying that it's going to happen, right? So if I see
Right.
Elon Musk and Sam Altman and a wide variety of people from different sides of the political aisle, or economics, as far as their philosophy, they all start to say that. I wonder, well, wow, they must be right. I think in practice it's going to be tricky, and not to go on a huge tangent, but whether it's a frontier model or an open source model, and where the resources go to the top, in a way, it really does require the person who accumulates the resources to have the generosity of spirit to redistribute the money. So whether it's the government through a closed model and a partnership,
Right.
or everybody gets a open model, the transition from where we are now to UBI is going to be so awkward, because
Yeah, I think it needs to come in phases,
for most people it sounds very unintuitive. I'd also be, I'm not an economist, but I'd be interested to know if just giving away free stuff would be an equivalent of UBI, because if UBI is meant
Right.
to give you the basic needs, maybe you just get utilities and maybe you get food included in life. And
Right.
that's
Wait a
because
minute.
otherwise,
Now
how
we're
do you
talking about,
plan?
like, is this turning into like communism or something? And America's not going to go for that one.
That's
I
my
mean,
point.
that's a
That's
whole
literally my
political thing.
point.
There's also, I mean, the biggest thing that I hear from people is who's going to pay for it, because everybody's like, I don't want to pay for it. Well, it's not a thing. You already pay for it, right? I mean, you already pay for everybody if they can't pay for themselves. If somebody doesn't have healthcare, goes to the emergency room, you still got to pay for it, right? It's just like, like there's all these programs and things that are done that if you didn't have to pay to run all the programs and everybody already had the money, yeah, and I don't know, like it's a thing. And the reason that I bring it up, I don't want to have like a whole conversation about UBI because neither of us are an expert on this fact, right? On that subject. But I think it's really important to look at the future of work and say, what's going to happen when there is something that can do most of the tasks that most knowledge workers in the world do for not just pennies on the dollar, but just for pennies, right? Like actual pennies. When it costs 10 cents for something to do the equivalent task of someone that takes a day to do that job, there's no way a company's going to be like, well, I'm just going to keep paying these people, $100,000 a year instead of paying $6 in API fees. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, to your point about if everyone does the same tactic, it becomes sort of vapid. I think if we try to compare current state to future state, that's going to be awkward because it's not going to be
Right.
the same, right? So pre-internet, post-internet, very different worlds. Post AI, very different world. So I'm on one hand, I've seen a lot of examples of where industrialization has shifted jobs like the printing press or agriculture. I've heard
Right.
plenty of people say that it won't destroy us. One thing I am interested about is what the impact will be on underserved countries. So obviously I live in the United States. I think of it as an American politics thing, but there's people all over the world who are starving without access to healthcare or the inability to communicate, whether they may have an issue where they're unable to communicate, like if you have ALS, or
Right.
perhaps you're just really poor and you're in a rural area without connectivity. One thing I think that I try to remind myself is not everybody is even aware that AI exists yet. And AI is going to get distributed across the entire world, I hope, in a way that will, on one hand, we may look at it as white collar folks and say, well, wow, what are we going to do? I hope we're scrappy enough to figure our way out of the box. But the other unintended thing that I'm not thinking enough about is what are we going to do when so many people are given the ability to participate? Because if everybody is lifted, you could be in Africa and not speak English, and now you can. You
Right.
could start a business in any country. You could speak every language. So there's a lot of, I think, short-term entrepreneurial opportunities for global. You as Matt, you could do SEO in Poland, no problem.
That's right. A lot of Polish people are always pitching me to do their SEO, to do SEO for us. I think there's also the idea there, and this is spoken about a lot online, is that the unequal distribution of AI, and it's not just a dollar factor, it's also an infrastructure factor, right? Like I live in Nova Scotia, and my biggest worry right now is that my power is going to stay on, right? Our joke here is that it's a first world country with first world prices and third world reliability, right? My internet goes out all the time. I got to have backup internet. Power goes out all the time, so I got to have generators, and not all of Canada's like that. It's because I live out in the middle of nowhere. But what that means, though, is if you are in, rural any country, or you are in a country that doesn't have high-speed internet infrastructure or access to, phones and tablets and things, through at least 5G, 6G cellular kind of thing, then you're not part of the AI generation, right? You can't use it. Like maybe you can chatbot back and forth a little bit, but you're not using a image or like a video generation model to do anything of any quality, right?
Right.
And I think that's a problem, right? Like, how are you going to have AI change the world when only 20% of the world has any access to it? So,
yeah, well, you bring up an interesting point. Two things that come to mind. One is I had a friend who worked for Habitat for Humanity and spent a lot of his 20s in third world countries, and
right.
not just third world countries, also Central America, Guatemala, things like that. And he remarked he went away for maybe 5 years, and they went from having no infrastructure to everybody had cell phones. And
Right.
so these interesting leaps occur where the cost to improve an infrastructure can be prohibitive if you're looking at the legacy technology, and then something like Starlink shows up, or you have this crazy ability to suddenly get everyone connected that comes out of nowhere, kind of like our GPS example on the iPhone. Just
Right.
something happens and now you do have connectivity. But yeah, that's one. And then the other is, to the point of Starlink, just like I think a lot of things are consolidated, there's only so many frontier models right now. There's probably OpenAI, there's Grok, there's Llama, there's Claude. If you want to be generous, you've got Mistral, Quinn, maybe a couple others, but you're already falling off after 3. Will AI be consolidated in a similar way? And will the full stack of technology, I mean, let's say Grok wins and Elon has Starlink, and then your embodiment comes through your car, which is Tesla. That's like pretty much everything with the robots too. So you'd have robots, cars,
Right.
Starlink, and your AI engine and the social media network under one umbrella. And that is, whether or not you like Elon or not, that is sort of the path to UBI, because whether or not Sam Altman wins with AGI or DeepSeek wins, it all has to roll up to one place in order to redistribute through a UBI. So your idea about connectivity globally is something, again, I don't think about enough, and I think it's a really good point, because the people who have access to the tools are going to be the quote unquote superhumans, and people without it will just be left behind.
Right. Well, you think about it a lot more when every time you drive your kid to school, you lose internet for 8 minutes on the way, in a
Right.
10-minute drive.
That
I think
happened
there's
to me.
right. Well, I think there's something interesting there also, which is kind of this race to AGI, and they're defining AGI, I think for the most part, as it can do the mental tasks of what 90% of humans have capacity. They're saying, okay, this is AGI, and there's different people say that. Now, personally, my idea of AGI is something that can autonomously do 90% of tasks, right? Where you can tell it, hey, go do this thing, and it can go do it. That's my idea of AGI. It doesn't have to be like this conscious thing. It doesn't have to be Skynet or something, right? It's got to be capable. And that's why I think like when I hear like Amade or Altman or one of these guys talking at these labs, they are like, they've seen something that we haven't seen yet, is the way I usually look at it, right? I see what they're talking about and I go, oh man, like these guys have peeked behind the curtain and there's something there that we don't know about yet, right? And honestly, I don't think that XAI is very good, their AI. I mean, he might catch up by just throwing money at it, but I think really there's only OpenAI and Anthropic right now that have models, and Gemini, have models that are really frontier models, in my own opinion. But the other idea is when DeepSeek came out, and even though there was been a lot of question about how much money they actually spent on training and stuff like that, that is besides the point. The point is that as soon as you have a model that is the frontier model, somebody catching up is what, 6 months, 12 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if somebody makes the greatest AI model that's ever been made and that does everything you could ever imagine, well, everybody else's model is only 6 to 12 months behind. So,
well, to your point about AGI, I don't know if it was Steve Wozniak or somebody, but I thought one of the original definitions of AGI is that a robot could enter any home and successfully make a cup of coffee.
Right.
And I kind of stick with that one, even though I know there are a lot of definitions. That one I always thought was kind of fun. The other thing is with multimodal AI and vision and robotics, I think that's where I don't disagree at all that Grok is not the best at the moment. I wonder with Grok 3 or 4, whatever the next version is, that will be a really interesting show of the cards, because if this new training facility turns out to be, that one in Tennessee, I believe, if it turns out to pay off, and then the integration with the Teslas and the sort of what people call the world models, I also follow NVIDIA, which is doing a ton of simulation world model training. And when you mentioned that, do you think that the owners of these frontier models or the managers may have seen something? That's often what I'm wondering. There's a cliche that says this is the worst it will ever be,
Right.
So if improvements iterate in perpetuity, it's just a matter of time. And that's certainly something I think the shift has now happened, is it's no longer just will we have AGI. Now it's more of a bet on how soon will we have AGI. And I think the secret sauce that I'm personally looking at is these world models, because NVIDIA and Jim Fan over at the robotics lab in NVIDIA, they're doing, gosh, I mean, I don't want to make up a number, so bear with me, but
Right.
orders of magnitudes, you may have 1,000 times the speed of real life simulation, where you could run training in parallel with 1 million robots training at 1,000 times the speed of normal speed.
Right.
That's almost impossible to fathom. And when you start to look at those things happening behind the scenes, I think that it will happen out of nowhere. I don't think we're going to see it coming when the costs come down and when the training come down. I see people now using their phone, for example, to use ChatGPT's camera capabilities
Right.
to look at their plumbing issues or to fix their hot water heater. That kind of stuff
Right.
is the slow burn to when you could just have either a robot do it, or I just think there's going to be, when you mentioned Grok, I think the thing about Grok is their multimodal capability. If they're able to sneak up from behind and have vision and robotic embodiment come ahead of just language models,
Right.
that could be a secret that would boost them ahead of the competition.
Well, I think having Tesla's data is an advantage, but I also think kind of the sleeper in this whole thing is Llama. And I think that Zuck, his bet on metaverse, even though it was terrible, I think his long-term bet was we can use everything from metaverse as world training data in the future, right?
Yeah.
Plus, they had to buy all those GPUs to do video in the first place for Reels to catch up to TikTok. So they've already been sitting on probably what was the largest data centers for, video in the first place.
I think that may be the Apple Newton symmetry. Zuck
Right.
coming out and the Apple Vision Pro, we all make fun of it just like we did the Apple Newton, but then the version 2 will come out 6 years from now and we're going to be in the matrix, and it'll
Yeah,
be,
and it's the meta glasses to get training data, and everything is training data, right?
correct.
Just like Google CAPTCHA didn't save anybody from bots or spam. All they did was sell all the training data for $800 million, right?
Right.
And Ethan, I know that we're kind of running out of time here. I don't know if you have to immediately go, if you got a couple more minutes.
No, I'm great to keep going. I'm
sure.
happy to stay as long as you'd like.
All right. Well, I do have another thing coming up, but it's not right away. So I wanted to ask you a couple things, and we'll switch gears a little bit. I know you're really big on the image creation side, and you've seen a lot of the video generation tools. And I wonder what you're thinking is coming in that area with generative tools being used in production media, like for commercials, radio commercials, TV commercials, maybe even shows or movies. If you have some thoughts on that side.
Yeah, that topic fascinates me. Disclosure, I'm much more familiar with image creation than video, but I've become kind of addicted to following what's called image to video technology, or mapping of gestures to a still image. So back in the day, there was a product called Viggle, where you could take one still image and it would animate that image and show the back of an image, which is quite amazing. And so I think you and I were talking earlier about augmented reality and convergence and multimodality. I think one thing that I'm picking up on, that I'm not sure I'm correct, but I'm not sure other people are looking at it, so I'm going to call it out in case I am correct. The ability to take a virtual reality learning, so something like an augmented reality or world model, and then take that learning and use it to drive animation of still pictures. So things like Gaussian splatting or neural radiance fields, that's a whole nother topic we haven't talked about. But essentially a Gaussian splat diffuses the missing parts across quite a bit of data in a still image. So you could hear Jensen at NAB, not NAB, but in the CES keynote that he gave, he was talking about the graphics cards for video engines using diffusion. So maybe 10% of your game is rendered and the rest is diffused, right? So you're saving compute. The same thing happens with image and video, where you could take very little information and fully animate something. And I think that combined, that type of training you see coming out of ByteDance, you see coming out of the TikTok worlds or the meta worlds, where they've got all this talking head video from TikToks, and they're able to train their systems using that data. They're not only training it for image and video, but they're also training it for something called segmentation and depthing, which is basically object recognition and then object tracking as it comes closer or further away from a camera. So I think the connection is going to be really counterintuitive at first until it snaps into place. But all this video and image training is also going to train embodied robots how to interact with the world, because the first thing you need to know when you enter the world as a robot or a drone is, what is every object in the room? What is it doing? Is it moving closer or away from me? And then in the case of images and people, are they expressing? So are they happy? Are they sad? Are they fearful? And so it's not something I think that most people would connect. Like when you build an image using a diffusion model like Midjourney, are you really building a 3D model, when in fact you're training inadvertently a lot of image segmentation data as well? That may be a little bit too in the weeds for a general audience, but I do think if you get me talking about images, that's where I'm looking at, is imaging, Gaussian splatting, and NERFs. Those would be the things I would Google.
Right. One of the interesting things on there is, like, if you look at a tool like Wonder Studio, where they're taking video or images and they're mapping out the distance of all the things in the image, and then using that to overlay models on people, right? That's where you can, Wonder Studio, it's been out for a while now, but what it does is you can take any video, doesn't matter what it is, shoot your own video, and you can replace one of the actors or multiple actors in it with a 3D model. So you can put a robot in where a person was, or a different person where a person was, and that's all that, kind of distance mapping technology is, to be able to put the model in the right position.
Yeah, it's really neat to see how sports are evolving. I don't know. I think especially for if you're just looking at it as an analyst, I don't know about as a consumer quite yet, but the ability to track every player, every shot, and do that very quickly post-season.
Right.
You could give, Gemini has a huge context window now. You could give every NBA game to an AI and tell me what to look for on any given team. Just like in boxing, you used to just pour over tapes and look for tells before someone throws a jab, how to know a hook's
Right.
coming. You could just have, if you're into sports and you're a nerd, it takes Moneyball to a whole nother level to be able to analyze things using object recognition and segmentation, to your point.
Right. I think one of the interesting things that I saw around the sports world was This Day in AI podcast, where those guys make Sim Theory as their product, which is an agent builder, and they trained a horse race kind of betting agent as one of their first products. And basically, you just put in all the information about all the horse races, as much information as you can get. You put it all in, and then you run the thing. And tells you who it thinks is going to win. And they were tracking it. They made thousands of dollars with this, testing this horse race betting agent.
Well,
that was last year. So
it's a tangentially, I don't know if you know this, but I was listening to the Lex Friedman podcast that was a deep dive into DeepSeek. It came out maybe 2 weeks ago. But do
you spend all 5.5 hours listening? I was like, geez, 5.5 hours. I gotta save that for the plane.
I do it 20 minutes at a time. But one interesting call out is that DeepSeek is basically a high frequency trading hedge fund. So just like it's basically horse racing for money. And that's where, DeepSeek came out of, the CPUs, all the power that they were using to do quantitative training for trading. That was what turned into DeepSeek.
Yeah, the DeepSeek model, I've used it. It's good. Honestly, I don't think it's as good as 4.0, but and the 03 Mini High is what it's called right now, which is the stupidest name ever. But 03 Mini High seems to be the best programming model right now that I've been using. Like if I'm writing code or something, I need some help, whatever. Or Sim Theory, actually, that I mentioned. I use Sim Theory because they have a create with code is what it's called. So it's like a code writing system, but it saves and executes the code at the same time while you're working with the model. So you can see how the software reacts as you're using it. And you can switch the model provider. So I can go from like DeepSeek to, Claude or whatever, right? And so far, 03 Mini High seems to be the best one for coding and getting it to do what I want with the least steps.
And what kind of code are you writing?
So, different things for different stuff. I'm doing some video game programming with it, specifically in Roblox. So it's Lua scripting. But then I'm also writing kind of Python stuff, mostly. And actually, the last episode of the podcast was about software on demand. And so I'm doing a lot of software on demand stuff where I'm like, okay, I need an app that does a thing. And like, for example, I wanted to extract all the information from the RSS feed for my podcast for a certain number of episodes and put it into a CSV file. So instead of going and figuring out how to do that in a spreadsheet, I just told it to write the software for it, and it wrote it. It only took me about 3 iterations. And I put my RSS feed in, I hit the button, it gives me a CSV that I download, and I have all the information. So, it's software on demand, which is amazing. Try it out, because I don't know how many times that I've searched for stuff and gone, you know what? I just need a piece of software that does this one specific thing, but I got to look through 80 different software apps that have 100 features to find the one thing that I want. And now I can just write it whenever I want. So it's
I've been using Claude 3.5. I've been using Claude 3.5 to do quite a bit of Python and Google Apps script code. It also builds me some Chrome extensions that I like, but I've never tried one of those cool co-pilots where you can switch the engine. I'll have to try that out.
Yeah, well, I mean, Claude still seems to work really good for front end coding, like CSS stuff and visuals. But yeah, O3 Mini High right now. It's O3 dash Mini dash High. That seems to be the one that gives me the best code right now. Strangely enough, I used it to iterate on the questions that I asked you today to help me kind of put my thoughts in and generate some questions that I thought would be helpful based on the information that we had available about you so that I could make some questions. And then I just went through and edited them as I needed, right? So
Hmm.
I should ask you
Well,
the
if you,
last question.
yeah, let's hear it.
All right. What do you think about AI transforming social media and specifically about AI where like YouTube has AI video generator now, Meta has, AI personalities and AI for you to generate your images and your posts for you. And do you think it's going to like do something like transform the social media user to just becoming a viewer instead of everyone having to be a content creator, or what do you think is going to happen in that world?
Yeah, that's a really great question. First, I think generationally, I have to acknowledge that it's hard to predict what people who grow up with this will do because
Right.
we're adjusting, right? So we're adults and we're transitioning. There are kids out there who are 5 years old who will never remember a day without ChatGPT helping them with their math homework, right?
Right.
So I think the idea of social media for everyone that grows into it, it's starting at that point where it is now. So, I'm still very much into curation. I look at social media as an inbox. I'd like to follow people and I want to read everything. The algorithm is my nemesis, right?
Right.
So I think number one, the younger people will probably just become native and use it in a way I can't predict. So I don't want to poo-poo it too much. But there's always been a little bit of divide between consumers and creators. And that
Right.
that is an interesting point you make because I love to share and I love to passionate and I'm a little bit of an evangelist. So I love to share. I don't necessarily need the spotlight, but there are a lot of people who do. I think
Right.
those people will continue to exist, and I think they're going to continue to create. I don't know what's going to happen when you have people who, there's always this moat concept where people get upset when someone who doesn't deserve to be a creator is suddenly given a tool that allows them to quote unquote cheat.
Right.
I do not subscribe to that. I think if you're a really smart person who may have trouble communicating, AI is going to take that nervousness or shyness and give you the power to have an avatar and be brave. I think that's a really cool side effect. You could be, there are plenty of people who have niche tech skills, but they're unable to participate in other ways. Maybe they're shy or they're just not good communicators. I think the ability to participate and bring everyone into the conversation is a good thing. That doesn't mean though that there's not the downsides of the internet though as a whole where letting everyone talk at once is a little bit chaotic. So I'm
Right.
hoping AI may also inadvertently help weed out some of the things that are duplicate content or spam and help me really laser focus on stuff that gives me joy and fits what I'm looking for at whatever age I'm at the time.
Yeah, that's kind of the hope, right? And I guess one of the things that I have a concern over, and this isn't just social media, this could be like music or streaming television or whatever it is, or YouTube, is that the company that owns the platform already has the data. So they know what video, let's just talk about video as an example. They know what type of video is currently going viral, what people like about it, what the people look like that are in it, what's the background, what's this, what's that. It knows all of those details. So what's to stop them from just generating another or 1,000 of that, testing them all, seeing which ones hit, which ones don't, getting rid of the ones that don't, iterating on the ones that do, and just keep drilling down until it's basically like the viral hit machine, right?
Yeah, I do hope that the interfaces change. I think one thing that we've seen very slow adoption is the difference of, web browsing and app stores. There should be no, we could be, if we leaned on the gas pedal, I think we could get rid of using apps. I think Apple, a year and a half ago, Apple came out with a large action model called Ferret. Ferret
Right.
can interact with apps without you having to open your phone. The idea that when I open my phone, it is a dopamine absolute just bazooka fire hose shooting me in
Right.
the face with temptations. Maybe AI, if it becomes a universal interface, I won't necessarily see that type of a stream anymore. And maybe that will just fade into the distance. And if I'm in the mood for something, I can just ask it, I got 5 minutes to kill, make it as productive as possible. Or, you know what, I have a headache. I don't want to think. Let's just look at some slam dunks, literally like at
Right.
basketball or something. But right now, to your point, it's pretty lazy. I find that the idea that if I'm scrolling and I pause, I believe that's one of the biggest indicators of what the algorithm uses to keep spamming me. So it's
Right.
going to be whatever's hyperbolic, whether it's whatever jars me enough to stop scrolling. It's a horrible, unvirtuous cycle of more and more junk. And I'm hoping AI gets rid of
Yeah.
that for sure.
And I really like, I understand the like the people talk about the TikTok algorithm a lot, how addictive the TikTok algorithm is. And I guess that the thing that I don't understand is why people want to be told what they should watch over and over. Like, why they should be removed from their own decision making process of what they're watching. And I understand that
Well,
it keeps showing you things that are more and more like what it thinks that you want to watch. But like personally, I would rather just go look for what I want, right? Like I don't need it to tell me what to watch. But
I
uh,
think that is going to be an issue as time goes on with or without AI, because content is going to continue to grow as a body of work. So, there's a really good YouTube video by Snapchat CEO Evan Spiegel. I believe it's just called "What is Snapchat?"
mhm,
And for some reason, people make fun of him for this video, but I thought it was perfect. It's like 3 or 4 minutes long, but it basically lays out the idea that our generation like to have a curated timeline. And whether that's our own timeline and our photos, media used to be precious. So a photo
right,
used to cost money. You had a camera, you had to print it, and you had to curate it because you
right,
couldn't just take pictures of anything. And that idea that younger generations, when they open Netflix, they have every single show ever created in the history of humanity. I mean, they could go watch MASH if they want, or they could watch the brand new Mr. Beast video. So without an algorithm, it would be you'd spend a lot of time, at least if you're me, changing the channel looking for what to watch and having that instant gratification if you're young,
yeah,
and knowing that you can't curate your consumption anymore. But I think I certainly would much rather be like you and be in control of my own destiny. And I
yeah.
don't
Well,
know if that's a
I think
generational thing.
curation is probably one of the most undervalued things nowadays, right? Because curation has basically been overtaken by affiliate marketing, right? Is I'm only going to curate things out of the ones that I can get paid for, right? And that's difficult because now I'm losing all of the stuff that might be good and free, or maybe it's good but they're just not paying somebody to tell you it's good. And all of those things are, some of them may be exactly what people want. I find a hard time, finding new music because YouTube or whatever I'm listening to at the time, or, whether it's Amazon Music or, whatever, Spotify, it's saying you're a 52-year-old man, 52-year-old white man. Here's more classic rock. And I'm like, God, I don't want any more classic rock. Like, I know them all. I can just go look up, Skid Row if I want to listen to it. I don't need to be told that I should be listening to it. I have a hard time finding something new that I like. And then once I started searching, I found there was lots of new music that I like. It's just not being shown to me, right?
Right.
And that realization that there's no curation of things that might be things that I like, but I'm just intentionally not being shown, was a real wake up call for me of algorithms.
I think that's a really good point. I'm lucky I've got two teenage daughters who have great music tastes, so I keep learning about
Right.
music from them. But to your point, I always wonder what's being omitted from my feed, whether it's a news station that I'm looking at or a personality. You
Right.
make a really good point about affiliates and even branded content. I remember I got duped by the New York Times, and I remember it almost like the shuttle disaster. That's how much it bothered me. But I opened the New York Times and I saw an article about orange is the new black, but it wasn't. It was about women in prison. And I read
Right.
this article, and it was a really good investigative piece about women in prison. But it was a front page of the New York Times, took up quite a bit of their homepage. And then at the very end, I noticed it was actually an advertisement branded content for Orange is the New Black.
Right.
And I loved that article because I learned a lot about women in prison. So it was a very good article, not influenced by not by the sponsor. However, I realized if Orange is the New Black had not commissioned that article, something else would have been on the homepage that day.
Right.
And then I just thought, well, wow, what if it's British Petroleum or who knows who's controlling the news? Because certainly Netflix, in my mind, even if I liked the article, should not be deciding what's on the front page of what I consider an open editorial homepage, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that idea is very scary to me. Of anytime I read anything, I'm wondering, well, what's the other side of this, or what am I not seeing in my algorithm?
Well, you and I both remember when the internet was going to be this magic place where everybody in the world connects and there's world peace and everybody's going to get along because now everybody can have access to facts and scientists and journalists and how wonderful it will be. And wow, did it take a turn over the last 20 years or so? Like it went from being this wonderful place of art and culture and everybody's going to be happy together to like this propaganda machine of misinformation and disinformation and you know curation that's for the profit of the people curating and like like the things that were fun and interesting about the internet 20 years ago don't exist anymore. Like nobody's coming up with the Homestar Runner cartoon in 2025, right? Like not just making video for the point of it's fun and it's artistic and people like it, you know. And if
It
they
could
do, you won't find it because it's free.
it could be our algorithm. Maybe we're trapped in a boomer cycle. My daughter, I got cracked up with her. She on Twitter, or no, on TikTok, when she was pretty young, let's say 13, 14, she would block everything she didn't like and
Right.
heart everything she did like. So her algorithm was either nuclear destruction, never see it again, or
Right.
I love it. And she curated her TikTok to the point where it's a pretty great feed, but she has no middle ground. That's one way to do it.
Yeah. Well, and also there's the idea of opposing viewpoints that disappear. So
Correct.
the more that you get drilled down in your filter bubble, the less opposing viewpoints you see. And then usually the only opposing viewpoint you see is somebody yelling at you because you're the opposite of what they think, right? Especially in
Right.
political discourse. And that's I mean, it's gonna happen. We're getting older, people getting old and grumpy, you know, and you got a bunch of Gen Xers who are already badass to begin with and not afraid of fighting each other. So, but I think this does stray a bit from the AI topic, but I think one thing that's interesting to kind of rein it back in about AI, and this is something that I discuss. I don't know if you agree with me or not, is the idea of omitting things from the AI training data that you don't want it to know. And this was an example was in DeepSync, right? Where you can't ask it about massacre of Tiananmen Square because it just refuses to talk about it. And people are saying, you know, how bad it is that it omits things that the parent company or the parent government don't want in it. But my argument to that is the whether it's the next AI or the one after that, it's going to be smart enough to figure out that something's been omitted, and it's going to figure out what it was. Right? There's enough clues there. If you talk about all of the media in the whole world, that it can figure out that this happened, even though you don't want it to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think the poker tell with DeepSeek is they released it knowing that that was omitted. So I've
Right.
always thought that's a little bit of a wink of like, yeah, we live in a state that's making us do this, but check it out. It's like
Right.
you see these enthusiastic engineers who are working under constraints. They're being extremely transparent about those constraints, or at least people they allowed it to be discovered pretty easily.
Right.
But yeah, your point's really fair because agency is very different than training. So if I ask something to go out on the web and go find something, that's different than its training set.
Right.
And it actually made me think of our social, to bring AI into our social conversation. There's no reason why Matt couldn't have 5 different profiles with AI, looking all over the internet for content you may like. So maybe, you've been trapped in your algorithm now for so long. Maybe you could bust out. So instead of getting classic rock, you just want, bebop jazz or
Right.
something, and you've got some
I
agent
got
that
my
goes,
AI bot that just looks for like kawaii metal, comes
yeah,
back.
exactly. It'd be kind of like I would love that to have some alter egos that go out for me every day, and depending on my mood, I can dip my toe into the various algorithm flavors.
Right. And then also that brings up the problem of, if I can make 5 of them, some government can make 1 million of them, right? And now you got a problem again, right? And just like the bot problem on X, like I can't even use my X feed anymore. It's just so much garbage in it that it's impossible for me to kind of get through the crap that's on there to try and find what I want. I've pretty much relegated it to the bin at this point. I mean, I still have an account, but I barely use it.
I check X every Friday, and I have a saved search that will pull up any
Right.
given account for the last week and take away replies. And I literally go in and I search X for probably 2 hours, and then I have a Chrome extension that exports all the links, and then I read them separately. So I
Right.
basically use X as an RSS reader once a week.
Yeah. I mean, I'll look up Altman and, some of those guys, but it's the only thing I do on there. And half the time, somebody else on like, my Blue Sky feed or something or Reddit or somewhere has already quoted that and put it on there anyway. So, it's definitely a different world out there. I think if you had and I don't want to go on like Lex Friedman's style for 5 hours. So I think maybe we should wrap it up here, but I do have one last question, and that is for the people out there who are like, entrepreneurs, business people, marketers, kind of our regular audience for the show. What do you think the biggest blind spot people have right now for what's coming with AI?
Oh, what's coming? Probably vision and audio. I think people still look at it as a chatbot. I mean, you and I are probably different, but for the average person that I was just talked to, like a friend or something, I still think they think of it as a chat GPT where it's a language model. I don't think people ever use their phone and show it a picture. I don't think they see the fact that it can hear you, understand you. I also think that they don't understand just how fast it's training in parallel. You made the point about what if the government could make 1 million agents? Well,
Right.
these folks are training. I believe the rumor on the street was that GPT-5 came out in the fall, and rather than release it, OpenAI has been using it to train whatever they call it, but essentially the next version. So
Right.
I think people are going to more they can play with it, especially paying the fee for a plus version would be my recommendation is pay the $19 a month for a couple months and really use it. A lot of people kick it, and they just, if it doesn't give them what they want the first time, they're not willing to coax it and work with it, and so they give up. So I think to answer
Right.
your question directly, multimodality is what people are missing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think a lot of people think that Chat GPT is
Oh,
the
I lost
AI.
your audio, Matt. I'm gonna have to figure something out. I'm really sorry that happened. Let me just figure out how to fix that.
It's all right.
Okay,
We
you're
might be
back.
having. Oh,
We're
there we
back.
go. So I think the biggest problem, I think you're right about that, but I think the biggest problem that people have is they think that Chat GPT is the AI and not that it's just an interface to the AI.
Right.
Uh,
A good example would be like the Bordy. There's a LinkedIn agent that can talk to you, and it's a layer where you can converse with a large data set that happens to be all of LinkedIn. And then this AI that you talk to will find like-minded people for you from the data set, translating it back into conversation. So it's almost like having a corporate recruiter or a good
right.
friend to talk to. I think when you think of a language bot being overlaid on top of a huge swath of information and the ability to take action on it, I think probably customer service will be the first time people get really excited when you call, let's say, Hilton to change your room, and it's immediate, effective, and joyful. Suddenly, people are going to really like AI a lot more.
Yeah. Honestly, we have a e-commerce store in the United States that we use for our company that it's kind of like a training ground for us, right? We use all of our tactics ourselves to see, does this work? And kind of put our money where our mouth is kind of thing. We put an AI customer service agent on it probably more than 6 months ago now. And it has been so effective. We've only ever had 2 complaints. They were both because it kept saying, let me talk to a real person, let me talk to a real person. And we didn't have it connected up properly to talk to a real person. But yeah, for the most part, no one even realizes that it's a bot. It's helped literally hundreds, if not 1,000 different chats at this point find their order, get their tracking number, figure out where their package is, find products that they need, find something on the website they couldn't find, right? It's done all that stuff. And, I used to have to answer that. So it's great, and nobody lost their job because we didn't hire somebody to do it. I was just doing it myself. So, Ethan, how can people get a hold of you if they want to connect?
I think LinkedIn's the best place. My name is Ethan Holland, and you can find me on LinkedIn and just send me a message. I'd be glad to connect.
Sounds good. You can get all your AI news at ethanbholland.com. And Ethan, it was great chatting with you today. It's nice for us to be able to connect rather than just chatting back and forth on the socials there.
Yeah, I'm really glad we connected too. It's been nice to get to know you.
Sounds good. All right, Ethan. We'll talk soon.
Talk to you later. Bye.
This voiceover used to be done by a human, but now it is synthetic. Ooh la la. If you want to know if your job or business is safe from disruption, read Matt's new book. Will AI Take My Job? Predictions about AI in corporations, small business, and the workplace. Available now on Amazon. Trust me, it'll be worth it.